Welcome to Loop Caribbean. My name is Alric Lindsay, and today with me is the Honorable Minister Kenneth Bryan, Minister of Ports and Tourism for the Cayman Islands. So Minister Bryan, tell us some more about the Caribbean Tourism Organization, your role and its objectives.
Well, first off, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to Loop Caribbean. It's a pleasure to be on here as a regional leader in media within the Caribbean. The CTO is the Caribbean Tourism Organization, which is the regional leader in tourism development. It's an agency that brings all the common issues and discussions that we have to have together as Caribbean islands to one central place so we can work together and develop ways to strengthen our Caribbean countries, at least the member states. The member states currently operate at 25 with the likes of the Cayman Islands, Trinidad, Tobago, Barbados, Bermuda, Bahamas, just to name a few. And our primary goal is about research, collaboration, training programs, analyzing data, best practices, and helping each jurisdiction on the best ways to develop the tourism product. As the chairperson, my job is to make sure that all of these synergies are working together hand in hand while we constantly market and promote the Caribbean across the world and within the Caribbean. So it's a glue agency. It's the leading agency to talk about tourism, about the issues we face, ways to improve it, to make sure that we continue to be attractive and to mitigate against any negative things like the environmental components, climate change, sargassum, those kinds of things. So it's just a central agency to bring all the positives together while we improve our tourism product, because all of the members, their economies depend heavily on the tourism product. So that's essentially what we are.
So you mentioned members that are countries. Do you also work closely with associations, private sector, businesses in each of these countries?
Yes, we have a number of allied agencies, particularly with the product, whether it be hotels, airlines, cruise lines, and so forth, because we all have a common interest. We're all in the business of tourism and serving our customers and our guests within our jurisdiction. So they are involved in the discussions, help us develop the best practices, new innovative measures that are happening within the industry, so we can collaborate and develop those policies and also transfer and disseminate that information amongst our member states. So they're a key component within the analysis of the continued development of the Caribbean tourism product.
So regarding the development of the Caribbean tourism product, what sort of ideas does the CTO have to attract other Caribbean islands to other Caribbean islands and to attract international visitors to the Caribbean?
Well, I mean, we constantly do our regular promotions where we do international conferences, we do collaborative marketing measures, marketing initiatives, and that's where a fund comes together. Each member pays a fee and it comes together. We create marketing strategies, like say, for instance, just recently we had New York Week, New York Caribbean Week, whereby all of the Caribbean countries come together in central New York. And New York is a major hub for the world, not only for the United States, where you have a large diaspora of many different types of people, and it gives us an opportunity to market ourselves. And many other conferences, whether it has to do with flights, cruise lines, or just general marketing conferences. We also work a lot with the private agency, like say, for instance, Expedia or any one of the agencies that deal with reservations and so forth. So working collaboratively with them wherever their space is what we do. Obviously, since I took the position as chairman, a lot of the marketing initiatives were depleted due to the COVID situation and lack of funding. Happy to say that post-COVID, a lot of the Caribbean islands are doing quite well. So our funding amounts are increasing, whereby we've got the opportunity to now use some of that funding for a general marketing program for all Caribbean islands that are member states. So that cross promotion is how we benefit. In respect to the inter-Caribbean connectivity and marketing, besides our difference in culture and carnivals and stuff like that, but we cross promote. It has been a bit of a challenge over the last couple of years due to air connectivity. We have a lot of connectivity to the Caribbean islands from outside of the Caribbean, but it's been a challenge post-COVID with the airlines, with the lack of pilots and so forth, for inter-Caribbean connectivity. That's slowly improving. Like, for example, the recent announcement with Cayman Airways for Cayman to Barbados. We see there's going to be a lot of connectivity options because Barbados is a hub and the Cayman Islands is starting to become a hub for connection to other places. We've been rather successful with our connections to the south, with Panama and a lot of South America, to the west with LA, to the north, like we've always been doing New York and a lot of the East Coast states, and now going to the east. That is going to help a lot of the inter-Caribbean travel. So for example, we have a lot of connectivity to Jamaica, Cuba, Honduras, and now this connection from a hub to another hub in the Eastern Caribbean islands will help. But that's only one small example. A lot of the international airlines like American, Delta, Jet, WestJet, and so forth, or JetBlue, they are all coming back online post-COVID. And while the airline industry starts to balance and level itself back out with all of the factors being considered, fuel prices, pilots availability, and those kinds of things. And we're going to see a lot of those connections come back. At least that's what we hope. But we don't just sit and hope for that. We try to initiate conversations through conferences. And whenever we have meetings, like for example, in October, we're having a state of the industry discussion where all the member states come together and go, where is the state of the industry or our tourism product right now? What are the top issues? So we're going to be discussing about sargassum, how it's affecting the Caribbean islands, also where we are with the Caribbean air connectivity. Are we talking with the aviation industry, continue to make that issue be a priority? What initiatives or incentives can we offer within the Caribbean to attract these independent airlines to continue that connectivity? Because without air connectivity, we are lost from a tourism product. But we're getting back there. We recognize that as much as we wish we had it back to where it was, a lot of these causes to the problem are outside of our reach to solve. So working hand in hand together to show where the benefit is for everybody. Because when the airlines are bringing people, they're making money. When they're bringing people, we are making money as well. So it's a collaboration approach at all times, having a lot of dialogue and analysis of the market in respect to tourism itself.
So let's go back to one of the things you mentioned about funding. How is the CTO funded?
It is funded by membership fees. So each country will have a number of visitors, and based on a certain ratio that is determined within the Council of Ministers, based on its constitution, depending on how many visitors you get, you pay a particular fee. And obviously I wouldn't be going through the individual member states' fee amounts, but it's based on a particular ratio. So the more visitors you get, the higher amount of membership fees you pay. But it's capped at a certain amount, and that's how we fund the organization and its efforts.
When you say number of visitors arriving, are you talking about airline visitors or cruise visitors?
Both. Okay. So it's stay over and cruise, because those are the main two areas of tourism. And tourism is transportation of persons into any one country. And that can go from leisure to business travel to inter-Caribbean travel. As long as you're not resident, you're considered to be a visitor.
So that brings up an interesting question. If each country is paying a different fee, would they get the same exposure when you're trying to promote regional travel and Caribbean tourism?
Yeah, well, in most cases, the ones that don't pay the same amount usually don't have the budgets in their own internal countries to have a marketing component. So if a country only has 100,000 visitors, they may not have any internal budget themselves. But if you have 2 million customers, you may have a department of tourism with marketing. So the members don't only depend on the CTO. CTO is one element of marketing of any Caribbean destination. what we try to do within the CTO is remind the people to focus on the Caribbean as a region, and then try to disseminate the differences between all the islands or the countries, whether it's based on Dutch, French, English, Spanish, because we have a diversity of different Caribbean islands, and show their unique options, whether one is mountainous, whether one is beach focused, whether it's eco-tourism, whether it's business travel, whether it's entertainment, or what are our cultural carnivals and those things. But we try to do it as a holistic promotion, and it's the best way you can get value for money for everybody. So will somebody get a little bit more value than the other? Yes, but it's the best model that we've created, and this model has been created over decades of analysis of many past chairmen, many past members, that is best value for everyone. Now, the marketing is not the only value that each member gets. There's other values that you can tap into. So for instance, that is sometimes pay to play. You get research data that is millions of dollars worth of data that the agency collects, analyzes, builds best practices, give you seminars where you can educate your diaspora, your residents on what's best to do in a particular area, whether it's cruise line, whether it's stayover, whether it's ecotourism, or whatever it may be. We even are advising on how to develop in a sustainable way, sustainable development. So we go past just tourism, but anything to do with supporting sustainable tourism is something that we will try to do the data analysis and research and best practices and offer that to you. If you were to do that as an independent state, you may spend hundreds, if not millions of dollars on this research data. Collectively, we put it together and give it to them free of cost as a member. You have access to training. We are willing to, as an organization, as an agency, come to your country and offer training to your civil servants and even your private sector. We always constantly have conferences and seminars about where the state of the industry is going, so you can be ahead of the game. What are the trends? So for example, in respect to cleanliness post-COVID, how you sell your product and that you're clean all the time was the main focus. And we were able to educate our members to say, focus on this in your marketing about your standards and your cleanliness. And we kept ahead of the game where people go, I want to be a part of the Caribbean tourism product, because we're competing against Europe, Africa, Asia. These are other tourism destinations. But once we promote the Caribbean, when one Caribbean island wins, every Caribbean island wins, because every Caribbean island could be different in some way. So today you'll come to the Cayman Islands, tomorrow maybe you go to Barbados. Another person may go, I'm going to go to Turks and Caicos today, next time I'll go to Saint Martin. So we believe in a collective approach of selling and marketing and sustaining and developing the Caribbean as a whole, because we know that once one person eats, eventually everybody will do so. Marketing and tourism is a rather interesting thing, because once you fall in love with a region, usually you stick to that. Most people who travel to the Caribbean stick to the Caribbean. They may always stay to the same Caribbean island, but if they go to Cayman today, maybe 2 years from now they go, I'm going to try out another Caribbean island. How about Turks and Caicos or Bahamas or Bermuda? Because you fall in love with what that energy brings. So we know that we compete with Europe and all of the other destinations that are trying to be in tourism, but the Caribbean is best at it globally.
Well, when you talk about the energy that each island brings, clearly when you have Dutch, Spanish, French, English throughout the Caribbean, you can imagine that each one of those places has a unique characteristic. So what sort of challenges do you experience at the level of CTO when you're trying to market regionally? You're trying to attract people to the Caribbean region, but then you notice that each of these places is actually unique. So what sort of challenges do you see there with having these unique destinations, but marketing in a broad way to attract more people?
Well, funny enough that you think uniqueness is a challenge. Actually, we see it as a benefit. That's one of the amazing things about the Caribbean, is because there's so many different options for you to choose from. I think maybe you're talking about the differences in language barriers, which we have acknowledged, particularly since I've become chairman and past chairmanships, about being more effective on communication in different languages and marketing in different destinations. So we have been heavily marketing in English-speaking jurisdictions, and now we're trying to change our focus to get a better balance in different languages. So marketing in France or in Dutch-speaking countries or Spanish-speaking countries, like we're doing a lot of more marketing in South America, because South America is a growing a market for visitors, and do a lot more marketing in Spanish. So not only doing a lot of the Northern American and European marketing and diversify that, but it's a balancing act, because the Caribbean is obviously, you have the Eastern Caribbean, Central, and to the West, and various different islands have different high market pocket percentages. So Cayman naturally depends heavily on the United States market. 80% of our tourism comes from there. So most of our marketing that we'd want done or be involved in is mostly English. In the Eastern Caribbean, they do a lot of European visitors because it's closer to them by flight compared to the United States market. And the goal of the agency is to give a better balance of diversity. One of the things that COVID taught us is that you don't want all your eggs in one basket, because, for example, with Cayman depending heavily on the United States for 80%, like many other Caribbean islands, if something happens, whether by natural disaster, by geopolitics, wars, or so forth, and the United States shuts its borders, 80% of our tourism dries up like that. And that's obviously severe for many, many reasons. So we want to make sure that all Caribbean islands have access to the diversity, not only depending on Europe. If Europe has a war, the Eastern Caribbean islands usually have a lot of trouble, and vice versa if anything happens in the Western Americas. So diversity is the key, and we're trying to get everybody to be able to get a piece of everybody's pie, because we believe that we have a lot more percentage share of the tourism product globally that we can get. We just haven't maximized it enough. So it's not even about competing against each other. What we're saying is, if we're getting 25% of the global tourism market, we don't have to compete against each other for that 25 if we all want to increase. What we need to do is get more percentage of the global thing. So we want to increase that another 5%. So if you're growing, you're not growing because I'm losing. You're growing because we're adding more visitors to the Caribbean. So diversity, accepting whatever the challenges that come along with that diversity, whether it's English barriers, connectivity barriers, aviation is becoming more efficient than ever. Planes are allowed to fly longer distances more efficiently on better fuels, and so forth. So making sure, working with our allied members in private sector, that they continue to make money and they want to bring visitors to the Caribbean, so that we all benefit.
In terms of bringing more visitors to the Caribbean, we know that some islands have a reputation when it comes to crime. How will you manage the communication of safety issues between the member countries so that tourists want to come, so tourists understand that things are improving and countries in the Caribbean are safe places to spend their vacation?
Well, firstly, anything to do with safety is an independent matter within each island and each member state. This is a tourism organization. Obviously, it's a priority for us because we're concerned about it, particularly how global media portrays it. Because unfortunately, I think we're victims of media specializing in one particular crime or event and ballooning it out of proportion. And most media companies across the world never highlight internal crime and issues that they have. I mean, I'm not going to name any countries or any networks, but sometimes they blow it out of proportion. But all the same, there is crime issues in any country. And I think that our job as an agency, as an organization, in respect to focusing on what's the priority for development of tourism, is to work with CARICOM, where the heads of the states of each country talk about issues such as safety, independence, and their economies and so forth, and remind them that we are the agency that's focused on a pillar of your economy, which is tourism. Remind them that these things are concerning. The trends are saying X. Our data is showing that visitors are concerned about this particular region or these particular types of habits that are happening. If there's anything you can do on a CARICOM level or within a state level at the head to address it. But we can't dictate to them what to do. Each member also has access to their own leader and in their own region. We always try to continue to promote the positive things of the Caribbean island and work with networks that sometimes magnify the issue to remind them that that the truth of any Caribbean island, for that fact, if you have one crime, while that one issue may be a problem, and granted, if it's a serious thing, it needs to be addressed. But there's also millions, tens of millions of visitors who come to the Caribbean, have a wonderful experience, have memories with their families, and enjoy and get away from all the stresses of life. And it's sometimes not fair that they highlight just for clickbait this particular one issue. So we try to balance that and remind the media the positives and try to get ahead of it. If we see something, say, okay, this is tapping in a lot of news networks, remind them of what the enforcement agency and the police agencies are doing on the ground to say that it's being addressed. So anybody from a safety perspective understand that things can happen, but they want to know that there's police and agencies in place that will bring the matter to justice. And that's all we can do in that case.
So you mentioned CARICOM and working with CARICOM. Is CARICOM an affiliate member or allied member, one of those allied members you mentioned?
Well, we try our best to work with CARICOM. As chairman, I try to communicate with the CARICOM as an agency, as a body, in anything that are issues for us. But the Cayman Islands is not a member, and neither are any of the overseas territories a member. We're allied members, so because we're not independent. But there's other member states whose countries are members of it, and through their either premier or prime minister or president, they will work with CARICOM on any issue. So if there's a tourism issue that we want brought on the table, we can happily work with one of the member states' leading person of their jurisdiction to bring it on the table. And we can also request that from CTO level to say, this is a concern, can you bring this as a discussion point? All agencies like this from a geopolitical level always try to coordinate because we're all in it for the same reason, which is success of our countries and our people.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bryan, for letting us know more about the CTO, your role, and all the good work you're doing. We look forward to hearing more about the CTO and your upcoming events.
Thank you so much. It's truly been a pleasure to be on here on Loop Caribbean, promoting our member states because they're important to us and working hand in hand with the media to get out that important role. So it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And that's Mr. Kenneth Bryan, the Minister of Tourism and Ports in the Cayman Islands, talking to us about the CTO, its role, objectives, and all the good work they're doing.